podcasserole. Welcome in.
You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendent and Leadership Podcast, a proud member of the Podcasserole Network. Hello, Jamie.
Before we launch in,
Good.
have a
Change your background. Change your background.
can't be done because no, I forgot my laptop in the rental car yesterday.
That's terrible. Oh,
It's-
Jamie, so where is it?
I mean, so we were working in San Diego in Oceanside. We did our workshop, and then I had Jessica drive from Oceanside back down to the airport. I'm like, can you drive so I can just crank out? I just basically had a pile of emails to crank out. She's like, yeah, totally. So I'm cranking. We're also late, right? We're late for the flight. We're fighting traffic, and we're like, it's going to be tight. It's going to be really close. They got the flight was delayed. I'm like, okay, we're delayed, but we're still like 15 minutes. Like we went through security 15 minutes before boarding started. Anyway, I'm cranking emails. We get to the airport. I close my laptop, jump out of the car, and I set my laptop down on the floor of the car, and I'm rushing to get to the plane. And I completely forgot to, what is it? Yes, exactly.
Why didn't you? Why didn't you take a breath? Why didn't you?
It's the doing too much. It's the too many duties. Like it's stress. Your stress is blocking. You're trying to do these things and your stress is blocking your thought process. And so I started the process for national to get it back. And I'm like, how hard can this be? It's literally a laptop laying on the chair, almost like laying on the front seat. And wrote to them and they're like, yep, takes 48 hours to find out whether we can locate it. And then we'll tell you whether we can find it. You'll get a message saying what the status is every day. And so after I submitted, a couple hours later, I got a message that said, we haven't found your laptop. We'll let you know. I'm like, how could you have not found it? That's kind of bananas. And I told you which car it was. I told you what day it was. I told you the rental number it was. I could tell you.
Oh, Jamie, I'm so sorry. That's terrible.
So to the point of put the background on. I'm on my iPad. It's not downloaded to my iPad. It's only downloaded.
No worries. It should be the worst thing.
Plus, I can't hook up my mic because the iPad only has one connector, and the iPad version of Zoom won't let you change the mic input. It will only let you change based on Bluetooth.
It will be fine. Everyone will understand. I mean, I really
so
wish for you to have your materials returned. Can I tell a story that is sort of like me too without I also had it hard. Only because we're having a conversation and it's almost as if we're having a cup of coffee or sitting around the campfire like, oh, I got it.
Brother, it's just like letting it go. Like it's out of my control.
No, of course.
It's
really incredible. That's really
let it go.
Mature. I don't know. But it's a heightened level or a different level of I can't do anything about it.
Our lives are on these things, man. Our lives are on these things.
I was like, what would happen if I left my computer? Oh my God. When we were younger, we had only one child at that time, and we were visiting a cousin who was a visiting scholar at Cambridge University in the UK.
Yeah.
And so we had everything. We were the kind of, but the third kid, we're like, car seat. Yeah, that seems kind of heavy. The first child, you're like, I'll preach you your food. I got the car seat and all the stuff, everything. So we're like, and I left a bag with our camera, little like camcorder because you couldn't.
You're recording
video.
every moment,
right? Oh yeah, that's the thing. It's like third kid's like, "Where's my video about my first year?" I'm like, I don't know.
In my head.
It's terrible. It's terrible. We did this whole video for first kid. That's have a great trip. We got the person at the toll booth to say, "Can you say have a great trip, Isaac?" So she's like, "Have a great trip, Isaac." By third kid, there's no one in the toll booth because you just scans you as you drive through. It's just terrible. But so we left it in the cab, and of course, then we borrowed bicycles from my cousin and rode bicycles. You could just totally imagine. Oh, in Cambridge, go to the police department. They're like, "Oh, we are the safest city and the most honest cabbies. That will be returned to you in no time." Never returned. Never. I was like,
exactly.
So I hope that yours gets returned, but it's still a story for us.
I will figure it out. I have to go with the family iPad until National officially says, which is after 48 hours, they officially say we don't have it. And I guess I'm off to the Apple store.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how to transition this to Ben Thompson and my conversation with Ben, which for those who are listening, one of the things I'm really excited about in terms of this conversation is so many schools are in the process of building and they're planning. And when I learned about Ben and the ability to maybe talk to somebody who has a podcast, but also is an architect, and I thought, oh man, this one's going to be really, maybe not for the curriculum instruction folks, but for those superintendents who have passed bonds or thinking about that and thinking about the kind of instructional space that they want to create for kids, this will be super cool.
That's how I felt, for sure. I totally was like, oh, wow, how cool, an architect. So, and maybe I don't have a way of transitioning from I lost my computer to.
Well, maybe things that get overlooked or stress. For example, when I was the assistant superintendent of elementary school, my first day on the job, we were opening up a new elementary school. And maybe what was overlooked was maybe don't put the electric panel over the kitchen sink in the cafeteria. In the kitchen. And so it exploded. And so we had to, at 3 a.m, robocall every family, like, hi, good morning. I know today's the first day of school and you're looking forward to it. Your school is actually closed until we can, it's because
the entire electrical panel can be replaced.
That's right. It's a new school year. You're not coming to school.
These are the questions I was going to ask you, actually. The question and Ben's conversation, which people will hear, I think is really great as it relates to what you and I believe in deeply. And that is that collaborative thought, like making decisions together, slowing down, making sure people have a way of saying, these are the things that matter to me. What are we about? What do we want to be about? That kind of thing.
Perfect. How about this? Let's get into the conversation and then let's talk about it afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Here's the question that I'm going to seed for afterwards.
Hey,
seeding this net for afterwards.
Yes.
That is the craziest build story that you have had as a superintendent. I feel like I want to hear Peter's craziest build story.
Okay. I will think about it while people are all listening. But before we get into it, I do want to remind people that IXL is one of our sponsors. And one of the things that they talk about is when we're building schools, it would be really great if there was one platform that sort of helped answer questions. And I mean that everything from like the simple things of like, how will the windows open? Because I've visited schools where the windows opened out and then kids ran into those like sort of windows. Yeah, terrible. Who designed this? So I'll just tell you, that kid almost blinded himself. But okay. But IXL, really, I mean, they have just one platform. And in that platform, teachers can personalize learning for their students. And it really gives teachers the tools that they need to enhance, differentiate instruction, all of this without adding more work to their plate. So they're used in 96 of the top 100 school districts. So check them out at ixl.com/imperfect. That'll give you a really nice way to figure out ways to support your kids. All right, Jamie, you are listening to? Oh, I get so excited.
Yeah, I know. You did. You got so excited.
I got so excited.
You are listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership podcast. I'm McMillan Pazdan.
And I'm Peter Stiepelman. Yeah, and we'll see you on the other side. You gotta finish it.
Yeah, I did. Barely.
Today on An Imperfect Leader, Ben Thompson is my guest. And Ben is the K-12 director at McMillan Pazdan Smith Architecture, where he leads the K-12 practice, serving clients throughout the Southeast. As an experienced architect and an accredited learning environments planner, that's a mouthful. So is it ALEP? Does that sound?
ALEP.
ALEP. His work focuses on providing design solutions to support student outcomes. Ben, really, truly welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
It is great to be with you, Peter. I really appreciate the opportunity here on talking about just something very important to, I think, schools, school systems, communities, and that's how you bring architecture into a school district or into a school. Pleasure to be with you. Looking really forward to the conversation.
I think it's going to be fun, and I totally agree with you. More often than not, I feel like we became superintendents through a pretty traditional route. I mean, teacher to principal to central office to superintendent. And then one of our jobs as a superintendent is to cast a vision for the community. And that often includes facility planning. It often includes a bond campaign, potentially, but very often, unless your community is sort of shrinking, it is these really important building projects. The school environment for kids and for those who serve them is super important. And most of us rely on others to help us sort of learn how to engage in master planning or how to figure out renovations or even just capital improvement projects. So if it's okay, I'd like to start there.
Sure.
And that would be a new construction question. And I think specifically the design process, particularly with school leaders, they spend a lot of time
sort of considering the social, emotional needs of children. And I'm curious, because I think in doing a little research on you, that this is an area for which you have great expertise in terms of the specific sort of architectural design choices and how things like they improve indoor air quality and creating flexible learning spaces, but they directly impact student well-being. And so I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about that. Your experiences a little bit around mental, physical health, academic improvement, all those types of things. How does architecture sort of fit into all of that?
Sure. It's a very broad question, and that's good because
I wouldn't take it as criticism. Exactly. I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, but that's intentional, I think.
No, totally intentional, because that's where we start with a lot of our clients too is, okay, where do we plug into this process to get you to the result that you want to at the end of a building program, whether that means a new construction or a renovation. I mean, you really have to think about all aspects of it, no matter what type of improvement you're making. So maybe just a little bit of context there in architecture. I can just say bluntly, I love what I do. Architecture is really, and I feel, very important to the success of any space, specifically in K-12 education or education more broadly, because you do have a direct connection between what you put and how you arrange that space and the outcomes that you're seeking. Just to kind of put that in context, what's kind of the basics that architects do overall? Like I said, we really have to understand how that space or how that series of space or how that campus needs to be used for the purpose of education, for the purpose of learning, for the purpose of community. So there's a very functional aspect at the root of kind of what we do. But in addition to really understanding how you use it or how you want to use any level of space, we've got to understand too and lead a team to impact systems, whether those be the things that are in the ceiling or the infrastructure that goes into a building or the technology that goes into learning environment specifically. All of those things have to come together and coordinate with each other to really produce a highly successful space. That's not to mention material selection, how it looks and acts and from a community presence standpoint. And then also architects as part of a team, you would hope, looking at an improvement plan overall, have to align all of that with the cost that's available to produce those, to produce those improvements or those new constructions overall. So really, in context, Peter, that's really the basics of kind of what we're doing and throughout the entire process. But what, like you mentioned, one thing that's a little bit different, I feel that I have a passion for, and my firm certainly has a passion for, is really going all in on what is that vision and strategy for our clients overall. For us and for, I think, every school district and every school leader there, you really want to see that environment be the best that it can be so that it can complement learning and not get in the way of learning. Now, that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but we have to marry that kind of functional aspect of what we do, the budget, and really what are you aspiring to do in the academic environment? And that might be student performance. That might be better connection between industry, bringing that into the classroom or into the learning environment. It might mean community, or it might mean all of those things. So really, we're trying to take all of that information, all of that desire to really produce a building that's fine-tuned to what's necessary for an individual client.
It does make me think of an architect that I worked with who said, we can do anything you want, just can you afford it? But I'd like to sort of come back to so whenever I'm coaching leaders, we talk about the system generates its behavior. So whatever policies or procedures you've put in place will actually impact the way that people behave and then get you the results, right? The results that you get are a function of its system. I imagine that architecture plays a role in that too. If you are trying to create a school where there is connection between people, between children and children and adults and adults, that there are some intentional ways to maybe go about doing that. So if we could just maybe role play for a second, I'm a superintendent and I've been working with my board and we're building a new school and we're trying to find ways to build connection, particularly because we recognize we've come back from a pandemic where there was so much disconnection. And now we want to be intentional about creating spaces where there is connection. And sometimes maybe people call that universal design, and I don't know if that's appropriate, but I'm curious, what might be some ways that you would approach that conversation? They say connection is important to us.
this is unscripted altogether, but that's
Right.
an exact question that I've gotten from a superintendent and then a district leadership team is, and so my answer back to them from was another question. What are you trying to accomplish? And through just conversations with them first, and then their principals, select teachers, and community members associated with that project, what we learned was that connection piece was a big deal. They had a couple of middle schools operating. This district had a couple of middle schools operating, and they were doing great from an academic performance standpoint. But one thing that each one of those schools told their leadership team and that they felt day in and day out was that disconnection from a teacher standpoint, wanting to work together, but having the building feel so separated when it comes to being able to collaborate together for teaching, for projects, even for students. Now, from an architectural standpoint, how would you run that down? So you want to think about, and we do think about a lot, is how do you group people within the campus that you're creating? I think that's an important first step. I mean, we're human beings, right? We like relational spaces. We like relational activities, and the learning environment is no different in that way. However, 1,000 students in one mass space is kind of scary. I mean,
It's like a chicken coop, right? There's
It's like a
usually a
chicken
pecking order until you get to a certain number.
Exactly.
And then there's just how.
No, precisely. And that's unmanageable. It's unmanageable just in conceptualizing that, but it's also unmanageable for teachers and staff and everybody else kind of involved. So one of the things that we think about first, and what I shared with this group as we started the design of a new middle school that could maybe operate a little bit different, still hold the same number of students, still hold the same number of activities and spaces. How do we group students and teachers differently than you have in the past? So what we found was there's an ideal, and this happens at an elementary school differently than a middle school, differently than a high school. There's an ideal number and clustering of classrooms together so that teachers feel like they can be together, facilitate learning together, and really interact together. And that goes the same way for students as well. So in the middle school context that I'm mentioning, it was anywhere from 125 to 200 students kind of being grouped together.
Right. Because often they do teams, right? So they will have they'll take that next step from elementary where you have just one classroom teacher to now you're a part of a team that has science, social studies, math, English, and then they share the kids. And so I imagine you're creating sort of these houses where there's an identity, at least to some extent.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You think about that. And it's even houses within houses, because if you have a large school, you're going to have, let's just say in the example of a middle school, and you have sixth grade, you have a grade level determination within that school structure as well. You might have multiple teams, so to speak, in any individual grade, but that gives that sense of identity to an area of the school. So they feel like they have a home base as well. They can actually get to know somebody in that smaller group setting rather than that, again, mass of 1,000 students or where you just get lost. And particularly when you're mentioning middle school, I mean, there's no more important time in terms of their development of identity than middle school. They're trying to figure out who are they and trying out lots of different things. That's fantastic. Our guest today is Ben Thompson, the K-12 director at McMillan Pazdan Smith Architecture, and he's also a podcast host. And so you are the podcast host of The Future of K-12 Education. And I'm sorry that I buried the lead there. That we launched right into design first. So can we back up? Tell us about your podcast. Sure. Yeah. Idea Exchange was the major title of it. We have a couple of different pieces to that. The Future of K-12 Education is one of those. Really, the podcast itself has been around since 2021. We do individual segments with a diverse number of folks that might affect that built environment. So talk a little bit about that, but the genesis of it is some of the same things that we've been talking about. Idea Exchange for us, for our firm, about a decade ago, we actually brought together in person a lot of community leaders. We brought together clients. We brought together those that might be associated with more of a community-led project. And what we found from that, we brought them all into a room. We had an agenda of trying to solve a problem, trying to solve a difficult community project. And within that interaction, we found that bringing all those folks together so they could hear the different perspectives in a rational context actually made the solution go a lot faster, and at the end of the day made the solution a lot better. So that's kind of our mentality and how we think about idea exchange. Fast forward to 2021, that's still the same thing that we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to bring all of the diverse players into conversation about their perspective on the built environment, and really using that to drive the discussion around how do you do what you do first, and then what are the things that in the built environment that can affect that either better or that you've seen might have some implications that we need to think about, talk about to better the systems that we're serving. So that's the whole idea. I feel like it's gone pretty well. We're still pretty young in doing that and doing the podcast, but it's been a great.
But it seems like a really great and practical way for you to engage a broader audience, certainly, and as well for your partners and potential partners to really kind of see how thoughtful you are about the process of building. And in fact, I actually want to explore collaboration a little bit. In the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension called nested patterns. And that really asks the question of how do we want to be together? And in that dimension, one of the terms is high levels of collaboration. And I think the relationship between a superintendent and their architect, and the architect that's serving the district, not their architect, but that is super important for sure. And what I've observed over my more than a decade in central office is that how essential it is to design renovations and new construction in that collaborative manner. Our most successful projects were those that included the people most impacted by them. I have been a part of a previous sort of process that was just a very small group of decision makers that then designed and built a building. And then the actual people who occupied that space said, what moron decided to put that here, or to do this, or to put an electric box over the sink in the kitchen? Like, what on earth? So I would like to explore this a little bit with collaboration in mind.
Sure.
What is maybe advice or best practices or just your approach to designing school facilities that really ensure that they remain adaptable and that they remain relevant, particularly for this ever-changing world that we're in?
Yeah, and I've experienced the same thing you have, Peter, is that small group makes decisions versus large group make decisions versus no group makes decisions. So it runs the gamut. But when we look back at what the actual outcome was in the project, what we find time and time again is that if you collaborate in a larger kind of context, it leads to better buy-in, A, and then better results at the end of the day, B. So really, we strive to be as collaborative as we can, knowing that we have a budget, knowing that we have a schedule. I mean, that's kind of baseline stuff that we have to understand as part of the mix. But we want to include collaboration to the greatest extent possible for these schools because they are true community centers. They're still one of the only community centers that we have in the United States. That's
what a great point.
Fundamental to kind of how we organize here overall. So the way that we approach it is there's a lot of good, talented folks with a school district. They don't all have to be in the room at the same time, but they do need to be contacted. They do need to be coordinated with. They do need to be interacted with. As part of our process, we do a lot of discovery at the very beginning of an initiative or of a design, where we go in and ask curriculum folks, what are the good things that are going on in a school district? What are some of the things that you are looking for aspirationally out of your students, out of your programs into the future? Not just looking at what you're doing now, but what are you trying to achieve overall strategically with your educational system? We're also doing small groups, building maintenance and facilities, because that's important. We want to make sure every operational dollar is well spent. A CEO might differ from how they prioritize things than maybe a curriculum or a human resource officer or a SRO officer, but all of them have to be in connection, coordinated into the design of a building. So just at the very beginning, process-wise, for us, what we try to do is a lot of discovery at the very beginning to give us an idea, and then an idea of how we should form the space. That discovery phase results in us actually writing a mission statement for the design of a facility. And I think that's an important step for any
I love that.
Or any school district, because we need to be judged by what we're trying to accomplish in that way. So if we put together, after meeting and discovery, put back the mission to the folks that we've talked to about the project, does this encapsulate what you're trying to achieve in the production of this improvement or in this new construction.
I love that. I think for a second here is just, so if we use connection as an example, as a theme that you're maybe starting to see universally of people saying, I want better examples. And I love the fact that you brought in the fact that in so many communities, the school serves as that community center as well. It can be the community center for basketball leagues, for baseball leagues, for community theater. It could be the place where people shelter in place should there be a tornado or a hurricane. So I think that's super important. And then I could imagine if that's the mission statement includes what we say we're building and why. First of all, now you've got commitment from both your internal stakeholders of the school plus your external, because they see they're the ones who are essentially putting up their homes as collateral to build that school. That's what that bond is, right? So now they have commitment. And then somebody floats an idea and it starts to get traction of, and we should build a planetarium. It allows you to at least go back to your mission statement to say, how does that build community? And maybe there's a great reason to do it. Likely it will redirect the conversation towards the priorities that you've established.
That's right. And back to your bigger point about collaboration, just kind of overall,
Yeah.
You want to make champions of everybody that you're engaged with. And those are actually the folks that are going to live in the space day in and day out. So when possible, you want them to be able to answer that question. I think you should always put a planetarium in, but here's the cost to do. Here's why it doesn't align, at least in this project, why. You need to provide some kind of basis for them to be able and arm them to be able to go out and have those conversations with their community, because they're part of the community too. They certainly have a stake in what is being built and what's being designed. But
good point.
Also, I would add to what you were saying about that mission statement. It is usually just a paragraph, but then it goes into those attributes that we're really trying to achieve by doing the design or by implementing the design in the way that we need to implement it. So yes, we want this out of the building, but here's how we're going to get to it overall. So I think
how often do you hear a community member say, we don't need the Taj Mahal. You don't need to build the Taj Mahal. At what point will that cease to, what will be the next sort of edifice that they will bring up as we don't need the Taj Mahal? That's always what I used to hear.
I get some surprises almost every day, Peter, but Taj Mahal has been one of those. It's been more than a decade now.
Right? I mean, it endures.
It's my entire career. I've heard that my entire career. I think it's the point well taken, right? We don't want to over design. We don't want to.
Right. We know we have to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money. We want to build something that's going to last and still should be attractive and reflect. Yeah.
Totally agree. And I think that's the premise that we need to just keep saying so that we can get rid of the Taj Mahal mentality.
Yes.
Overall, because we take it, I can say as an architect and as a designer, I kind of take that for granted. It's all right. We're not going to do that. Sometimes don't express that, but we do need to. I think that's worth saying to everybody here. We all have the best intentions of using every single dime and cent in the right way to drive it. And more collaboration means that we are defending that overall in terms of the project and in terms of how you speak about the project kind of overall. The more that you align it to what you want to get out of the building and the outcomes from the students, the teachers, the community, the better you can describe how that dollar is actually going to work for you. So that is part of collaboration, but you can't shortcut that step. You really have to go through the process rather to get there.
I love it. I'd like to ask you a question that I ask every guest who comes on the show. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
My knee-jerk reaction is, aren't we all? I think that's the thing about it is, I think one thing that it makes me think about is, what are we trying to become? We're very future focused, want to make sure that we're thinking about what, not in the case of schools, what an individual school might be teaching today, but what they might be teaching in the future. So really think about overall what that future result is, what that future outcome is. And I think about those words, imperfect leader, is really what we're striving to do individually as well. We're developing through time, just like a design would develop through time, just like a curriculum would develop through time. So I think being an imperfect leader is probably the best, so long as you've got your sights set on not perfection, but betterment and improvement overall.
So I want to talk a minute about the Mosaic Project. It is one of our favorite organizations and has over 25 years of experience empowering students to really celebrate differences, communicate assertively, and resolve conflict peacefully at their outdoor school. I happen to have experience being part of the Mosaic Project, and so I can absolutely tell you it's an amazing organization. Their innovative SEL curriculum is now available to our Imperfect Leader audience. And so you can get a 10% discount through their new documentary film-based Mosaic Classroom Project. So just let the people know during your onboarding process to receive that 10% discount is to just mention An Imperfect Leader. Learn more about the Mosaic Project at mosaicproject.org.
This is Greg Meyer, Jamie's partner at APC Leadership Collaborative. Superintendents know that school principals are the single biggest lever that any school district has for improving student joy and success. Unfortunately, there's very little professional development for the specific things that a principal has to do to improve their school. At APC Leadership Collaborative, we specialize in coaching principals to take on audacious goals, build their leadership skills, and make big improvements in their school. If that inspires you, let's connect and talk about how we can collaborate. Find APC Leadership Collaborative online at apccolab.com.
When leaders think in systems, they think differently. They see the big picture, making decisions that create coherence and strengthen communication across their teams. They build adaptability, flexibility, and engagement. Every day, school leaders face complex challenges, from student engagement to staff alignment. What if your team could see those challenges as part of a bigger picture? That's what happens when you think in systems. It's how leaders turn complexity into connection and challenges into opportunities for growth. At the Waters Center for Systems Thinking, we help educators and organizations build this capacity, developing the habits and tools that turn vision into action. Think differently, think in systems. Sign up for our webinars, free resources, or a consultation by visiting our website, which you can find in the show notes.
We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest today is Ben Thompson, the K-12 director at McMillan Pazdan Smith Architecture and the host of Idea Exchange, the Future of K-12 Education podcast. Now, in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they made and then what did they learn. So I imagine there are so many great opportunities to sort of explore all the different experiences you've had to sort of say, yeah, this is what we learned from that experience. So I can't tell you, I'm so excited. Here we go. Ben, what happened?
Oh, there are many lessons learned, Peter, in any given one individual project. And when you start to compile hundreds of them together, you kind of start to see a little bit of a pattern, and you hope an improvement into the future when it comes to that too. Early in my career, when I talk with clients, school boards, superintendents, leadership at districts, even down to the school level, really the concern is how do we make decisions and how do we make that as quickly as possible. So one thing that I learned along the way is that the opportunity just to shortcut and answer the question is always there and available to you from your perspective. And so one thing that I've learned through the years is that's not necessarily what you need to do when you look at a significant public building, a significant community building like a school. You really need to involve a lot of people and test whether your idea of the perception of the improvement that's necessary at the school is valid. So actually bringing in a lot of collaborative efforts with different groups that are varied that will be involved in a school or a building program is really important. And I think the way that I learned that is the hard way, right? I went up and for a client early in my career is I just answered community members directly. And that's not really what they need. They need the authentic leader that's going to be in the school that has gone through the process of making the decision that can really talk to their community, their student, how that's going to actually work at the school. That's one thing that I've learned through my career is the more that you involve people, the better that outcome and that interaction with others is going to be.
Let me see if I understand it correctly. So you have an example where earlier in your career that you were serving and supporting a client, a partner school district to design a building. And if I'm reading between the lines, you were working with them and then you were invited to participate in a community forum, whether that be a board meeting or some type of town hall or some sort of just come and see the design. And you were the one answering the questions for the community. So you're giving responses that may have satisfied some, may have created confusion or frustration for others. And the actual leaders who were going to be leading in those buildings were on the sidelines watching this presentation unfold. And so
Sure.
does that sound, am I kind of capturing?
That's right.
Okay.
And that was purposeful too. They just said, go handle it. And the learning.
Right. That's why we
was-
hired you. Look, we've picked you to be our architect. We did
Right.
an RFQ and you're qualified. Go do it.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. But the takeaway though is that's fine, but it doesn't actually help you sell or think about or promote what you're trying to accomplish in the school. You really need a whole team around you rather than just one person or even a small group of people saying the same thing, having gone through the process so they know the rationale on decision making. It just can't be, it can't be just one person as your spokesman. It needs to be a group of people really in describing that decision making process for
That's
community.
interesting. Okay. So then if I understand even more, I think, is that you started the description of your scenario by sort of reminding all of us as leaders that there can be an impulse to make a quick decision and we should avoid that impulse, that you have to take the time to really understand what you're trying to accomplish and then answer those questions almost as a panel. Like any one of us can answer this question to really demonstrate this was a team effort, not a single point of success or potentially a single point of failure.
That's right.
Okay.
And not only demonstrate it, you actually have to do the work back behind
Yeah.
getting to that public engagement of some description. Those should actually happen in sequence with each other as well. But I think everybody really appreciates the different perspectives of others that are experts in certain areas. Like I can't, as an architect, speak to curriculum, for instance, as authentically as someone that deals with curriculum day in and day out. So what is that perspective? How are decisions made in the number of classes, the grouping, the number of students in a space? That person or a group of folks can speak specifically to a topic like that rather than trying to have one spokesman be the sole source
Understand.
of inspiration or understanding.
Yeah, I mean, you could imagine a superintendent or a principal saying, look, we held this many meetings, we came together, we created these bubble maps to sort of see where were the priority in terms of space and things like that. And of course, that everybody wants to prioritize certain pieces that'll be the cornerstone or the central point. And we're not going to have a 90-story building that just goes, everyone's in the center. So really, we turn to our architect to help us understand what we're trying to accomplish. And then, so would you mind, Ben, taking it from here and sort of explaining, after you've heard what the community wanted, how the deliberate reasons for putting the cafeteria on the opposite side of where the band rehearses, or the gymnasium having an entrance to the larger parking lot because on the weekends it can be then used as a community, as a community treasure, as a community resource, those types of things. I'm trying to like sort of think that if what got overlooked was a single person trying to answer questions, and that the lesson learned is like, you really have to do that work together, that they can sort of talk about, we created this mission together, and then we turned it over to the expert to show us how it could look. And then he can explain to you why he made those decisions.
No, that's 100% accurate. I mean, the more that you involve everybody in that decision-making process, it comes through. I mean, that's the point, is that you can authentically see that when you present to groups in that way. Now, if you get that side of it down, you're always going to get questions that are kind of outside of the scope. You're always going to get questions about, have you considered this or whether you considered that? Those are a lot easier to answer if you can really explain what decisions that you made and why you made them to begin with as a group.
When you were looking back on the experience you're describing, what was something that you learned about relationships, or what new relationships were formed as a result of that experience?
You know, just looking forward into how we operate today and how we engage folks today, it is night and day. A lot of school systems initially have a reaction of no, not involving a lot of folks into the mix, thinking it might either cause dissension, or it might cause a little bit of heartburn from a community standpoint, or it might take too long. So there's that thought about being engaged at the very beginning, but the way that you do that we found is actually put it into a process so that you can say and do the things that you need input on and at the right time, rather than just trying to ask all the questions at one time. Looking back on that example of where it didn't work so well, and the example of how we kind of work that now and process that through now, that engagement piece, night and day. The results are good. The community knows what they're doing. They may not agree, but at least they know precisely why things are the way that they are. And they can look towards the superintendent, they can look towards school leaders and have the answers to the questions that they have specifically about any given project. So, that tends to lead to better results in the academic environment. And that's 10 years down the road. So there's a huge downstream benefit of just doing something as simple as engaging folks at the beginning of a construction and design process.
Oh, what an interesting,
that you don't
and
see at the very beginning. Right.
I mean, when you think about it, really, the process that you're doing there will have implications, a ripple effect on future development or future construction projects or renovation requests to your community.
Exactly.
To the level, oh man, what an important sort of thinking in terms of the unintended consequence of not engaging people from the very beginning could mean a no vote down the road because they didn't listen to us last time. Why would we give them another chance? Really smart. What was something that frustrated you? So looking back on it, I have a sense, but what was frustrating for you in that situation? Here you are early in your career. So no doubt you don't make those, not mistake, but you orchestrate it a little bit differently now.
Yeah. So, what was frustrating about that is that desire to really get out there and not be the one single person that's speaking to why we did what we did. The frustrating part was I know all of the folks that I was working with were great people. They were doing a fantastic job. They were making progress academically and otherwise for their school district. What was frustrating is that I couldn't share that as a
right.
In terms of
they're like, John, tell them we did this work together.
Exactly. They know the answer to the question. They just need a little bit of support when it comes to how to organize and achieve a really active public session or a really active public town hall. And that's okay. We can help there. It's just the frustration was, okay, tell them, guys, you've done this. You know better than anybody to describe what you're trying to accomplish here educationally and otherwise. That's a little frustrating. You learn along the way.
That's the whole point of this whole process, is to sort of look back on what have I learned and to sort of engage in this really deeply reflective piece, because in the end, good things happen. And so I imagine that as you then began to continue to work and as you've grown your practice and your presence in the Southeast and are sought after to be a district architect or a member of your team, that there's a clear process that you've put in place based on the learnings of the past. And so what is something that's good that came out of this experience?
So really thinking about that process of engagement. Now, when we look at any given large project or improvement that our firm does, or that we're individually as architects engaged with as part of the firm, we really put that process into effect, not just the production of drawings, not just the documents that are necessary for permitting, not all of those pieces, but in addition to those pieces, how do we interact with each one of those departments within an organization? How do we interact with the school and the select folks that are going to be using this school? And even down to how do we interact with students so that they can be part of that mix too? Their perspective might and is different than maybe a teacher's perspective or a guidance counselor's perspective or anyone within the school. So how can we use that interaction with them to really affect the space that we're providing, but in terms of the features that it has, the size and scale that it is, or its relation to other parts of the building? We take that seriously. I hope you can see that, is that we really put that emphasis not in just the production of what we do as architects, but really integrating that interaction delivery within that same time frame overall. One last thing I'd say there is, I mentioned this earlier, is that you can't ask all things at one time. You've got to You've got to really put it down in understandable chunks so that you can really have a robust conversation about curriculum or, for instance, or any other part of the school that's being affected by the
Right. Or special programming that's there. Or
That's right.
sometimes the school forgets to tell the architect, we actually have a class here for children who have diapering needs, and you're a middle school. So you may have almost adult sized children, then you need changing tables and things like that and make that a deliberate piece of the planning so that you have wide door frames, because you may have children who need to access because they use a wheelchair. All those kinds of things, super important to talk to the people who are in those buildings and the potential future programs that might exist there. This has been super interesting. I've been looking forward to our conversation just for every reason that we've discussed today. Our guest today was Ben Thompson, the K-12 director at McMillan Pazdan Smith Architecture, the host of Idea Exchange, the Future of K-12 Education podcast. And one of the exercises I was doing with a colleague just the other day was thinking about the years 2040, what do schools need to look like? And I imagine that you're doing that work all the time. What are your immediate needs? We know we can learn from the past. What are your needs now? And let's cast an eye towards what are we going to need in the future? And even like simple little things. I was reading about some of the work that you do, and I saw the removal of lockers, or not even installing them anymore, because lockers maybe are really from the past. And so then how do you use those spaces to create little carve outs for a collaborative space for kids to do projects together, for a tutor to work with a child, or for kids or adults just to sit in comfortable chairs, to have these flexible spaces. And I thought, doesn't have to be the most innovative. It is an innovation. And I think it's a rethinking of space. And so at any rate, the last thing I would say is, we know that 90% of the community gets their information from their friends and neighbors. And so you've been so intentional today about talking about harvesting that collective wisdom as part of that collaborative process, so that you say buy-in. I sometimes prefer the term commitment. And so this commitment to what it is that the school district is trying to achieve for its children. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Peter, I loved it too. Thank you for the invitation. And I really enjoyed the conversation as well. It's an important topic, and obviously very excited about it, because one thing that we can really look forward to are these spaces for our kids, for our communities. And there's in my view, no more important space than a school to really think about community in that way and cast that vision for the future.
Hey, Peter, we're back. What do you want to, why don't we start with the big theme? I think this theme came up more than once with Ben Thompson, and that theme of what I would describe as collaborative decision-making. And though the reason why I thought this was good for superintendents was just a sense of, yes, that's what we should do. My question to you is, what prevents us from doing that? Is it just speed? Like he talked about, is it just efficiency?
That's interesting. So first of all, this week I get to talk with the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents. And one of the questions I'm anticipating from the executive director, Jim Flynn, is asking me, so you've done all these interviews and all these questions, and you've met superintendents from around the world. And what are some of the sort of like overarching themes that you hear over and over again? And I would say that Ben here in this conversation hit on one of them in particular. You got to actually go talk to the people most impacted by a decision. And so I do think, in terms of like his after action review and sort of bypassing the school and going directly to people who are asking questions and providing those answers, is that you rob the opportunity of slowing down and really explaining the why on some of this. And so I thought of some examples of, I know you teed us up before we even went into the conversation of, hey, what's the most wild? I don't know if I have wild ones, as much as if you don't include nutrition services in the design and they can actually walk you through the flow, you'll find that you'll build a school with a cafeteria where kids are like, almost like a traffic jam where you forgot to put any traffic lights. So kids are just banging into each other so it's like bumper cars. It's just terrible. One time day and it looks like a taco massacre, because during the pandemic, I thought I was being helpful by creating like a set of arrows in the boardroom to show where people would come in, where they would stand and wait 6 feet from each other. And then when they were going to make public comment, where they would go to, and then how they would wipe down the podium and then walk out. And once I was done taping these arrows, my safety and security director was like,
who the hell did this? Like, it looked so bad. And it just looked like people were just going to be like Keystone Cops running into each other from every, who could follow this? I was like, this is how my brain works. It's like, oh my God. So I'd say that is an example I saw, nutrition services where you didn't include them. Same thing for the custodial closet when it's placed down the hallway, yet their needs are near the cafeteria, or they're going to need to snow plow, and yet the plow is in the basement, and yet it does no good in the basement. It needs to be up by the street level. I've seen examples of a special education classroom where a child had diapering needs. And so just having the poor teachers had to put up a curtain and stuff because nobody thought about a double wide door so that it can be access for a child who's confined to a wheelchair. So it's just like all those kind of things. I don't know if any of them are wild as much as just like, what happened here? Who didn't get consulted? And typically it's because the person who didn't get included was the person at the highest level who was just like, yeah, I'm going to make this decision quickly. So let's just do this and that's fine. And then just move on.
Or even if, I wonder too, if we're making sometimes decisions where at multiple meetings about the design, but because I don't know anything about the cafeteria flow, nothing. I don't think to question it. It's they're like, we did it dead better though. We put a big
right. And slow down. Like, how many schools we've built? We do this all the time. We've done
that. Sounds great.
I know exactly. Yeah. I know exactly. Another example is, so you anticipate having the school serve as a community center, which means that how do you create a space where either the public can get into the gymnasium space from the outdoor parking lot so that they're not coming through the whole building and navigating. So you can close off the building and then create this space where they can come in and have an overhang so that when it's raining or snow, like people can, and make that overhang for snow be at
an A-frame.
An A-frame. Thank you. So that you're not having to send someone up there to shovel the roof because you just decided to make it flat. The other piece is, okay, so you also want the people to have community meetings. And so you want your library in the very center, in the heart, and you're really sending a message of what you want. Instead, you buried it in the second floor upstairs, and now people can't actually access it. Yeah.
And now you've got your front office spending a ton of time telling people where to go.
You need to accompany them because now in a safety and security kind of thing, you're not going to be like, it's upstairs. If you don't find it, just keep walking around, look for it. Ask a kid. They'll tell you, now.
Yeah, so good. Oh, man. I mean, I think the other thing that really resonated was this concept of and it actually came up with Doug Bolton about this was a previous episode with the author and Doug Bolton, Dr. Bolton. And the idea of it as a community center, like this is the place where everybody, and for so many small communities, that is 100% true. And I love his thinking, the way Ben Thompson was talking about it, like that we're really trying to design, like who are all the different kinds of people that might be using this space. It isn't just about where are we going to put the science classes.
Yeah, no, I can direct you to the quote specifically. He says, architecture is really, and I feel very important to the success of any space, specifically in K-12 education or education more broadly, because you do have a direct connection between what you put in, how you arrange that space, and the outcomes that you're seeking. And I truly believe that. I mean, if you look at Sherry Cammey, who was a superintendent in Baldwin, New York, who was a AASA past president, who really rethought learning spaces because she truly believed, let's get out of the rows and some of the, like, how do we create comfortable seating? You're asking kids to sit all day. Can you sit all day? I cannot. And it's not because I'm in my 50s. It's because I wasn't designed to sit all day. And yet we ask kids to do that.
Yeah, for hours on end. I mean, this goes to another, hey, Peter, how come you didn't ask him what is the most innovative building he's ever been a part of that he would describe as innovative? I mean, sometimes I think that we end up creating these buildings, even in the new builds, we create buildings that are replications of what we already know. And there's no way to create an innovative building without getting a model or something.
Yeah.
That makes
and I'll tell you, it's because school boards and superintendents are trying to avoid the comment in the paper that says, what are we building, the Taj Mahal?
Yeah, right.
Just type in Taj Mahal school building. And I guarantee if I went and did that right now, you'd have 1,000 entries of people. That's a comment that someone wants to say. And so they typically are saying, okay, I want to be good stewards of taxpayer money. I'm going to build these with block and brick. I'm going to make them 100-year-old that they can last to be 100 years. And that's such an easy excuse. And I'm just as guilty. It's such an easy excuse. Innovation doesn't have to be expensive.
No, it does not.
Innovation and be an attractive looking building and thinking about the ways that you want to engage kids. And so, yeah.
I mean, look at some of I would point to within my own community, the two new public libraries that are in my community where I live are just spectacular. And yes, they were built with public funds. And yes, they were not building the Taj Mahal. They were just public libraries. But because the community is weighing in, more than one person is trying to think creatively about how the space could be used now, you have more people going. I love working at the library. More people going to do their daily work because so many folks are working remotely. They know that the middle school, which is right next door to the public library, lets out at 2:30. So what do they have? They have multiple spaces for middle school students, so they don't disrupt the rest of the people in the library, which was happening. Yeah, all of those kinds of thinking I thought were just so wonderful. And the space field innovative.
Yes. And I'll give you two innovations that come to mind for me that are not expensive necessarily. One is you take out the lockers, or you never even put in the lockers if you're building a middle school or something like that. And you now use that space that would have been used for lockers for collaborative space for kids to sit in comfortable seating with great lighting and for reading and for whatever. Another one is you don't have to build a classroom for every teacher. Every teacher doesn't need a classroom in the middle schools and in the high school.
Yeah.
I mean, elementary, you got your classroom. However, there are so many classrooms that just sit empty for a certain number of periods because the teacher has a plan time. So they're sitting in that space. Now, I am saying create a separate space for teachers to have a teacher work area for their team or their content area, which gives them the opportunity to do collaboration that it doesn't have to always be so planned and sort of scripted. But I mean, the last few weeks, you've talked about the power of conversation, even if you're talking about, you've used the reference of Pokemon cards, right? In this case, they could be talking about anything that they were seeing. What was the show that you were telling me about? Pluribus or something?
Pluribus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe they're talking about that, but they're in that space building connection to each other and probably content as well as they start to think about stuff. And so get them out of that one empty space and use the space for scheduling other teachers to go in.
And redefine the teacher's lounge, right? You're redefining the concept.
Yeah, and have a dedicated other lounge if you want. This is a teacher work area that you can create these big tables and you've got your space. And man,
I'll say one more thing in relation to innovation, what I think is really interesting, especially as it relates to making these choices that are fiscally responsible, thus possibly diminishing creativity. What's interesting to me in all of the schools that I've been in is that when that happens, there are principals who then take it upon themselves to innovate with the uninspiring space that they have. That all of a sudden, between the two buildings here in California, which was literally just a dead space, the principal has put picnic tables and streamers.
To his point, he said creating spaces that foster connection, right? So relational spaces, relational activity. He said we like relational spaces. We like relational activities, and the learning environment should be no different.
That's exactly. And this principal just did it on their own, right? They're like, why don't we just move some of the lunch tables here? That way kids coming out of the cafeteria or the cafetorium here could just sit here and have lunch together. And then it could also go over there. There's more than one space. We don't just like that. And all of a sudden it feels, that side of the building, this side of the building are connected with an outdoor collective space that feels quite nice. In fact, if I got to choose, I'd sit there. That I think is pretty great. Yeah.
So as you noted, you invited people you didn't invite them to give us 5 stars, but I would like them to give us 5 stars. You did invite them to talk about maybe some wild design that were part of their school district. And I guess I would just end with one of the things that Ben talked about when I asked him about what's an imperfect leader to him. What does it mean? And it's not what he said was something that I think we all believe, which is it's not about perfection, but betterment and improvement overall. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. And so as you're building your buildings, as you're expanding or renovating, as you're engaging your community, first taking that time to really understand what they want for the learning environment for kids and nudging them if they need a little bit of nudging because they're in a traditional mindset about what schools should look like. But at the same time, really making sure it's an inclusive process. I don't have anything else to add unless you do.
Just that it doesn't have to be an intimidating process to slow down and listen to multiple people. Creating structures to listen to people is one of the most invigorating and wonderful ways to do this process. So it's not just about making decisions about the building, but actually you're both building relationships with your community while making decisions about this. Those two things go hand in hand, and putting in structures to do that, supporting supporting leaders to figure out what are the best ways to pull people together. It isn't just always a large community town hall. There's more than one way to do that. You can actually build trust in your community while at the same time getting a building planned out.
I love it. All right, you've been listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiefelman.
And I'm Jamie Almanzan.
And we will see you next week. See you, Jamie.
Take care.